Well, good evening. I'm very excited to be here with y'all tonight. I know we're going to have a very lively and civil discussion about a topic that is very controversial and invokes a lot of emotion and passion. So I know that the women that are going to be here tonight are going to conduct themselves with dignity and respect and treat each other that way, and I'm sure everyone in the audience will do the same. And remember that we are not in the Texas Senate this evening. We are at Churrasco. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to introduce our speakers. So we have Ms. Heather Busby from NARAL Pro-Choice. Ms. Busby is the Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Texas since November of 2012. Prior to that, she was an Assistant Travis County Attorney, procuring protective orders for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. She was a founding board member of the Lilith Fund and has been working on abortion access issues since 1999, when she managed the Rosie Jimenez Fund. She has served on the boards of the National Network of Abortion Funds and Law Students for Reproductive Justice. She has a BA in Anthropology from the University of Texas at Austin and a Juris Doctorate from South Texas College of Law. I'm a UH grad, so I'm sorry that... where she co-founded the LSRJ chapter. She led her school's ACLU student group and was awarded the LBJ Civil Rights Award for her work assisting survivors of human trafficking while interning at the South Texas Civil Rights Project. She loves volunteering in her community and has provided pro bono legal assistance to immigrants, taught ESL classes, served as a mentor to middle school students, and worked the hotline as a domestic violence shelter. So thank you very much for all of your volunteer work. I actually came from a forum on human trafficking, so I'm especially grateful for your volunteer in that area. And we are also joined by Miss, and I'm going to pronounce your name.
That's okay.
Emily Kibido. You've got to be from Louisiana, right? Okay. Emily has been a lobbyist with Texas Right to Life for 2 legislative sessions. She earned a degree in political science from Stephen F. Austin University and is currently in her 3rd and final year at Baylor Law School in Waco. Sic 'em Bears. Emily has been active in the pro-life movement since college, establishing the first pro-life advocacy student group at SFA, creating the Pregnant and Parenting Student Scholarship Program, and volunteering at a pregnancy resource center. The scholarship program she created helps college students continue to pursue higher education while pregnant or parenting a child. Her legal training has been supplemented by externships at the Supreme Court of Texas and in the Civil Medicaid Fraud Division of the Attorney General's Office. And thank you very much for your work in that capacity, because you are really helping to save taxpayer monies. There is a lot of fraud. We hear about it in the Public Health Committee, which I serve on. So as you can see, we have 2 very well-educated speakers this evening. And so the format will be, each one will be given 15 minutes to present their argument, and then there will be some questioning after that. And so I'll just ask for everyone to refrain from any outbursts until we have concluded the presentations.
I just want to say thank you to Rusty for putting this event together and for thinking to include Texas Right to Life on behalf of everyone at our organization. We are thankful to have been included, and I look forward to discussing this issue that is not only one of the most important issues to my heart, but one of the most important issues of our day that I believe. As you heard a little bit in my biography, I've walked alongside that 16-year-old who didn't think that having a baby would allow her to go to college. I've walked with those girls that we call the hard cases. I've walked alongside the father who watched a judge sign away his unborn child's life over his objections. I have studied individual rights, the right to privacy, women's right to control our own body. I have thought about these things and discussed these with girls that are in this situation. And every time it comes back, for me, it comes back to, it's not my heart that I'm stopping. It's not my arms and legs that I'm preventing further growth of. It's not my voice that's being silenced, but that of someone else's. There are 3 things that the Liberty Caucus platform supports: limited government, individual rights, and a free market. It is in these first 2 that I clearly find the pro-life position widely available, in limited government and individual rights. In order to get to this question of what do we do about abortion, what do we do, what's the proper role of government when it comes to this abortion debate, we have to start with the question of, when do human rights begin? That question, and how each of us individually decide what that answer is, determines how we view the role of government, how we view regulation, how we view taxes going to promote abortion. So when do human rights begin? Do they begin at when we begin? Do human rights begin when human life begins? Or do they begin at some line after that? It is a scientific fact that human life does begin with fertilization. We know that when there's a fertilized egg, a separate human being is created. If left to its natural course, uninhibited from any outside influences, what will result 100% of the time is the continuous growing of a person. It's not going to grow into something else. The morally relevant scientific fact here is that the baby, as she's growing inside her mother's womb, has a unique DNA. It's not the DNA of her mother, but it's her DNA. Her heartbeat begins to beat at 18 days after conception, and around between weeks 8 and 9, she has her own toenails and fingernails. It's hers. A human being's growth is a continuum. We're a zygote, an embryo, to a fetus, to a newborn, to an adolescent, to an adult. These are useful labels that we use to designate different stages of growth on the same individual. We don't use these labels to talk about different individuals, but the same individual in different stages of her life. Today, we can't, with science, we don't argue about when life begins, really. It's not a debate that we have when we're having these discussions. What the question is when do human rights begin? My position is that human rights come to us as a function of merely being human, and that they should begin when we begin. Pro-lifers, we categorically reject the idea of coming up with arbitrary lines that allow other people to decide when we do and when we do not have rights. We should get such a basic right as the right to life by function of being human. If you think, in several embarrassing instances in history, as a species, we have determined that simply being one of us, that simply being a human being, wasn't sufficient to warrant protection under our society, under our laws. That you had to be a human plus be something else to get that protection. You had to be a human being plus be a Caucasian. You had to be a human being and not Jewish. We now look back on all of these instances with a general sense of, how could we? We're appalled that we would think that because someone is a human, they needed something additional in order to have human rights. With abortion, we are once again exclaiming that merely being human isn't sufficient to warrant protection, to warrant value in our society, to warrant protection under us. Even the groups that I mentioned earlier that had been aggressed upon, they had more of a chance to be heard. They had more of a voice, more of a defense than the unborn do. The unborn are the most aggressed upon segment of our population that we have come to do this to. So what is it? What else must you have? Must you be born? That kind of doesn't sit well with our laws on when a pregnant woman gets murdered. There's 2 chargeable homicides there. So do we have to be human plus be planned or wanted by the mother who's carrying the child. As a society, we've been down the road of believing that merely being part of us, of the human race, isn't enough to be protected by our society and under our laws. But requiring that something else never ends well for us. What is missing from much of the talk around the abortion debate is that when we champion abortion, we are saying that a human only has value when she possesses a certain utility, a certain level of maturity, a certain level of brain function. Such stands can and they have led us to very dark places throughout history. So what, you say? You believe that human rights begin when human life begins, and I believe that human rights begin when we have the mental capacity to reason, or at 22 weeks. What does it matter? You have your opinion and I have my opinion. The government shouldn't be involved in this decision. In preparing for tonight's forum, I read a quote from the Libertarian Party chair in response to the various abortion regulation measures that are going on throughout the country. The chair stated, "In my view, there's no conflict. The best way to respect life is to prevent government from interfering with individual rights." The government can't be uninvolved in the abortion debate. Many people equate keeping government out of the abortion debate with keep abortion legal. Those two phrases are not synonymous. To keep abortion out of the debate assumes that you would have a government that is a truly neutral third party, a government that sits on the sidelines and neither promotes nor prevents, or prohibits abortion. But by keeping abortion legal, the government is sanctioning abortion. Having a neutral government is something that works in theory, but right now it's not reality. And so government has to take a position on whether to to prevent or to allow abortion. So the question on however you feel about how much the government should be involved in this decision all goes back to your answer of the original question on when do human rights begin. Because if you can believe that human rights begin when human life begins, and that we as humans get such basic rights as the right to life by function of merely being a human, that we don't need something additional, then what is the basic role of government? The basic role of government is to protect and defend the life that is within it. And therefore, government has to be involved in the abortion debate. Another problem with the get government out of the debate argument assumes that abortion is a victimless crime. On par with individual rights and liberty, advocating the government shouldn't punish such behavior that is between consenting adults. Well, abortion always takes at least one non-consenting victim. Sometimes, as we've seen with Carpin and Dr. Gosnell, abortion can take the life of the mother and the unborn child. Abortion, the government can't be uninvolved in a decision that takes the life of its citizens. It either has to promote it or to prohibit it. Now, if we're not, we've been talking about human rights and when do human rights begin, but for a second, let's assume that human rights don't begin when human life begins, that you have to have that extra something else in order for human rights to attach to us. Where does this line of reasoning take us? If we don't allow science to dictate to us when life begins, if we throw science out the window at that point, then we have to throw science out the window on determining when we're trying to determine what's the end of our life. If we are casual about the status of humans at the beginning, and if we believe that it can be an arbitrary line if someone is sufficiently a person to warrant our protection at the beginning of life, shouldn't that line of logic go to the end of life to say that there's an arbitrary moving line on what we can take those protections away? Some have cast this argument as ludicrous, as outrageous. This argument, it's a slippery slope, some might say that it is. But Being casual about the status of humans at the end of life is a direct reflection on how we treat those at the beginning of life. It's not a slippery slope argument, because such discrimination against those who are weaker, against those who are more feeble than we are, than what we deem to be normal, those with handicaps, their lives have been in trouble since 1999 in our state. In Texas, under Chapter 166 of the Texas Health and Safety Code, we allow in the state a panel to be picked by a hospital to decide to override patients' wishes on treatment, to implement a DNR order without your consent or over your objections. These are the kind of logics that flow from determining that we're not going to let science define what life is, and that there's something else that's going to be needed in order for human rights to attach. If we can just arbitrarily decide when human rights attach to us as persons, that when we are sufficient persons, then that logic flows, it has to flow, to when we're talking about when is the end of our life. Something that I don't think we are ready to go to as a society. When we start, individual rights are the precondition to everything. If you believe that human rights begin, it's not an argument of my opinion versus your opinion, the government should stay out of it. If you believe that human rights don't require something additional to be attached, then at the basic core, the government has to be involved in the abortion debate. The first individual right, the one that must be present to lead to all others, is the right to life. Who then, I ask you, gets that right to life? Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to have this discussion with all of you, and thanks to Rusty for inviting me. Yesterday when I spoke to Rusty, he said y'all would have a projector, and I was like, oh, I got to put together a PowerPoint, and I hate PowerPoint. But I did it, and it's at the back of the room, which I don't expect you all to be following it, but maybe I'll just use that for my guide if that's okay with everyone. So my name is Heather Busby. I'm the Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Texas, as Representative Davis told you earlier. A little bit about me: I have been in this movement for a long time, in particular working with women who want to access abortion services but are unable to do so, mostly through lack of funding. And I've worked through a private organization that raises the money to assist them. And over the years, I've heard every single story you can hear from women. And one thing I've learned about this movement is that when you think you've heard it all, you'll hear something new. And that's another theme that I found in my work in the domestic violence movement, is that when we make laws that apply to everyone and affect their personal lives, there's such a depth of experience that people live, and so that's where the harm comes in, when we're trying to basically say that everyone has the same experience when that's not true at all. So that's where I come into this. I come into this with the voices of women in my head, the many, many women I've spoken to, thousands over the years. So that's me. NARAL Pro-Choice Texas is an organization. We're nonpartisan. It's the political arm of the pro-choice movement. And Shelley, if you'll keep going. Sorry, my assistant at the back of the room is Shelley Gupta-Brutsky. So we work to protect the rights of all people to make their own decisions regarding their reproduction, to decide whether, when, and how to parent. So we work for access to safe legal abortion, and we also fight for the full range of family planning available to everyone in the state. We advocate for responsible, medically accurate, comprehensive sexual education, and the right of every person to make their own reproductive decisions. So I want to, the title of this talk was pro-choice or pro-life, but what I've found in my experience as someone who's getting a lot older is that you can't always apply those labels. And as I've talked to people about this issue, a lot of people say to me, well, I'm pro-life, but I believe that women should make their own choice. Or I'm pro-life, but I think that the government should not have a say in this issue. I've heard, also people say, well, I'm pro-choice, but I have a problem with late-term abortion. And people fall all along the spectrum, and this is not an issue where you can really apply a label black and white. I think that is fairly rare in people's lives. It is something that's very nuanced because it is deeply, deeply personal. And so, that's why it needs to remain an individual decision, an individual right, because even those who identify as pro-life often feel that, well, closing clinics and making safe legal abortion unavailable is wrong. Or I'm pro-life, but I think everyone should have access to contraceptives. It's something that is very varied. Shelley, if you'll switch to the next slide, please. So I have a nice little story up there that you can't really read from the back, but I wanted to share it with you. So in the last couple of months, I received many stories from people emailing me, sending me their personal stories. And one of them really stood out, and I sat at my computer and cried because it really, really touched me. And so I wanted to share it because I think it's very relevant to the argument that you can't really apply those labels and that this issue is very complex. So there's a woman who I'll call Jane to protect her confidentiality, wrote me. She said, I'm a mother of 4 young children and a widow. My husband John died 18 months ago in a horrible accident with no insurance. I was a stay-at-home mom who homeschooled her children. I only have a high school diploma. We aren't doing too good on my job as a nurse's aide. It's hard, tiring work. I'm on my feet all day, my folks are gone, and I have no family support. A few months ago, a friend of John's from high school came by to offer his condolences on my loss. He started coming by more often, and one night I gave in to desire. I had been so lonely for so long, I mostly just wanted to be held. It went further than that. After that night, his visits suddenly stopped, and I haven't seen him since. He won't return my calls, and I don't even know where he lives or his last name. I'm pregnant. I've got an appointment next week. I have to drive 300 miles, and I have to stay the night because there's a waiting period. It's going to be very expensive. I sold my wedding ring and some of John's tools. I've always been pro-life because that's what I was taught. I can't have this baby. How do I work if I'm pregnant? We barely eat now. How do I buy diapers and formula too? I know myself too well. I could never do adoption. I know I will go through this. I know I will go through with this because it's what's best for the children that I already have. I see no other way. I understand now the importance of abortions being safe, legal, and available. I wish that clinic was still in my town, the one I used to protest at with my church group. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I would never have thought in a million years that I would have an abortion. I'm having an abortion now, not because I want one, but because my family and I need one. So you can see how deeply personal and private this decision is. Even someone who their whole life thinks that it's wrong and thinks that they would never go through with it, until you're in that position, you don't know. Even someone who identifies as pro-choice may find themselves with an unplanned pregnancy and feel very strongly that they want to continue no matter what the odds are. So it's something that each person should have the right to decide for themselves. The government should stay out. Politicians are not your doctor, and they should not interfere with the doctor-patient relationship to the level that they are here in Texas today. Every one of us should have the freedom to make medical decisions that are best for us, our families, and our bodies. And we should get to decide what happens to our bodies, what kind of family we want in our lives, and what is best for our health. And if the right to make these decisions is taken away from you, who is deciding for you? I wanted to touch on religious freedom a bit, and I think that's very important given my colleague's assertion that human rights and humanity begins at fertilization, because among major religions that differs widely. So, ask yourself, what do the major religions say about abortion? And if there's one religious viewpoint that's going to dominate, which one shall it be? And if that dominant religious viewpoint differs and infringes upon your own beliefs, what does that mean for you? So on the slideshow, I just posted some examples of the variety of different faiths and their beliefs. So very quickly, National Association of Evangelicals is opposed to abortion, but states that there are situations in which terminating a pregnancy is warranted, such as preserving the life of the mother, rape, or incest. United Church of Christ is a firm advocate for reproductive rights, including the right to safe abortion. Hinduism has a do no harm approach, and traditional Hindu teachings condemn abortions because it violates the teachings of nonviolence. Judaism has especially among the different types of Judaism, has different teachings. But it generally believes in safeguarding the life and well-being of a mother. American Baptist churches encourages couples to seek spiritual counsel as they prayerfully and conscientiously consider their decision. Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Islam, Hinduism, I have all these different examples. I'm not going to bore you through reading every one of them. But the point I want to make is that among the different faiths, and even within those various faiths, there are different religious viewpoints. Some believe that life does begin at fertilization, but others don't. So if we legislate that life begins at fertilization, what about the faiths that don't believe that? Where is their religious freedom in that? So I looked up some libertarian views on abortion. Based on the title of this event, I saw that the Libertarian Party platform basically leaves it out. They think that government should stay out of the matter and leave the question to each individual. And I'm going to feel like I might be running low on time. No, I'm good? Okay. So the question I want to ask is, why don't we trust women to make this decision? I've heard a lot of rhetoric that speaks to me as a deep distrust of women and their ability to make responsible adult choices. I've heard a lot of misogyny in the debates, and a lot of shaming of women, as if women get pregnant all by themselves and men aren't playing a role in that action. So I wanted to touch on a bit of some of the reasons why women choose abortion, and these quotes come from the women that I've spoken to over the years. It's a very, very small sampling. But many women choose this because, maybe their husband left them and they have children they need to support. I've heard a lot of women who make this decision because of a domestic violence situation. One story sticks out in my mind of a woman who told me about her son who she decided to leave her abusive husband because her young son was growing up to be a mini abuser. He was mimicking his father, telling her that she was stupid and ugly. She was pregnant and she couldn't leave him if she had another child with him. So she felt that that was the best decision for her and her son. I've talked to many parents over the years, grandmas, aunts, uncles, of young girls who find themselves pregnant. The other day, a woman called my office and she said, "My daughter's 15. She already has one child. She can't have another one." A lot of people try to have responsible sex, but the birth control fails. Condoms break. And, a lot of people choose abortion because they want to fulfill their lives and their dreams. And sometimes it's for health reasons. If you're diagnosed with cancer, you may have to choose between getting chemotherapy and living, or terminating the pregnancy, going through with your treatment, and having the possibility of having a child down the line. So I included some statistics in my slideshow, super policy nerdy. But the point I wanted to make with these slides, in general, there are a lot of stats there about child abuse. We need to take care of the children we have today. I think that is what pro-life should be about, is caring and making sure that every child has a good quality of life. I would like to point out that Texas ranks the second highest number of uninsured children in the nation, 7th in the nation for the highest percentage of children living in poverty. We have the 4th highest teen birth rate and the very highest in the nation of repeat teen pregnancies. And we're 50th, dead last, in women receiving prenatal care in the first trimester of pregnancy. So we have a long way to go. I just wanted to also point out really quickly that prevention is key, and we're falling far short on contraceptives. Texas currently ranks 36th in the percentage of women whose needs were met when seeking contraceptives, and I believe that number will continue to decline as more and more family planning clinics clinics close around the state. I'm going to wrap it up because I'm almost out, it looks like. I went way overboard with my slideshow, I'm sorry. But, to conclude, I want to say that this is a deeply personal, nuanced issue that can't be decided in black and white terms. The decision to parent is something that we should not take lightly. Pregnancy is not something that's easy for a lot of women. I've talked to women who've had to go on bed rest, go into the hospital, had their normal day-to-day lives severely compromised by being pregnant. And these are women who wanted to carry to term. Imagine that you're a woman who would lose your job because it's an hourly job, and you don't have health care, and you can't support the children that you have already. What are those women, when they make the choice and decide that this is the best decision for them, who are we to say we're not living their lives? And I also wanted to reiterate that religious viewpoints on this issue are varied, and when one religion dominates the other, it threatens the religious liberty of all of us. So, in summary, government should not be involved in these personal, private decisions. Thank you very much.